You ever get that feeling that the biggest stories in the news are just noise? Well, today, we're digging into an argument that says that's not an accident. It's a distraction game, and it's supposedly designed to keep you glued to the drama, while the really important stuff, the policy changes, happen kind of in the background.
And this quote right here, it pretty much sums up the whole thing. The idea is, well, pretty straightforward. The stuff that gets us all riled up online and on the news, that's not the real story. It's the decoy.
Okay, so how does this game even work? Well, the source we're looking at today says it all starts with the media, specifically their role in cooking up something called a morality panic.
And what's a morality panic? Think of it like this. It's when something kind of minor, pretty superficial, gets blown way, way out of proportion until it's this huge, widespread outrage. And the point, according to this argument, isn't to keep you informed. It's just to keep you busy.
Right, and here's where it gets really interesting. The source we're looking at claims these blowups aren't just happening by chance. No, there's supposedly a deliberate strategy, a way to pull your attention away from the real policy changes, the stuff that actually affects your life in a big way.
So, to back this all up, the source video gives us a really fascinating case study. It's a tale of two waves, literally. They compare the media's reaction to two different public figures making almost the exact same hand gesture. Let's check it out.
So, look at this. The commentator points out what they see as a massive double standard. On one hand, you've got Elon Musk's gesture, which they say was treated like a national emergency. But then, when Zoran Mamdani, a politician from New York, does a similar thing, well, the source claims the outrage machine suddenly runs out of batteries. Silence.
And that brings up the big question, right? Why the difference? According to the commentator, it's because the hand gesture was never the real story to begin with. The real story was what the politician said just moments later.
And that's what we're getting into now, the policy behind the panic. The source claims the whole hand-waving thing was just cover for a very specific statement about housing policy in New York.
So here's the quote that the commentator says is the real news. Now, on the surface, you hear words like responsibly steward, and it sounds okay, right? Reasonable. But the source says, hang on, look closer. Specifically at those last two words. Those two words, step in. Now, according to the source's reading of this, that's not just a casual phrase. They see it as code for a major power shift. The idea is that the government would get to define what responsible even means, and then they'd get to enforce it. Not the owner, not the tenant.
And the warning from the commentator is that, hey, if you accept this logic for housing, you've set a precedent. The argument they're making is that this same step-in idea could easily be stretched to cover all sorts of other things, which would just expand government control across the board. Okay, so the analysis in the source video doesn't just stop at the policy language. It actually zooms out a bit and looks at other symbolic things that happened at the same event. The argument is that these symbols also give us clues about what's really going on.
First up is the book used for the oath of office. The commentator really hones in on this, arguing that the choice to swear on the Quran is a huge cultural signal, something we shouldn't just gloss over. Now, it's really important to be clear here. What we're showing you are the specific assertions made in the source material. The argument they put forward is that certain tenets of the Quran are at odds with American legal norms. And because of that, they argue, choosing to swear an oath on it is a powerful symbolic statement. We're just laying out their argument about symbolism so you can see how they build their case.
All right, let's look at the second symbol they point out. The commentator also focuses on the actual stage setup, specifically where the American flag was placed during the ceremony.
So according to the source, if you look at photos from that day, the American flag is kind of off to the side, almost tucked out of view. It's not front and center. And to the commentator, this isn't just a random staging choice, it's another symbol. So, where does all this go? How does it all tie together? Well, the commentary wraps up by connecting all these observations, the policy, the symbols, to what it calls a growing frustration among regular, everyday working people. And this quote, it's meant to capture a very specific vibe that the source thinks is spreading. You know, that feeling when people make jokes and share memes about being played for a fool. But underneath all the laughing, there's this real growing sense of, well, disillusionment. And this question? This really gets to the absolute core of the cultural shift the source is warning about. The argument is simple. When people start to feel like the whole game is rigged, Eventually, the jokes stop, and they start asking themselves this really fundamental question about what they're even doing. So, what's the call to action here? What's the big takeaway? The source has some pretty direct advice. Ignore the outrage. They're telling their audience to focus on the specific words being used, those phrases like responsibly steward and we'll step in. Because the argument goes, that's where the real power grabs are happening, quietly behind the scenes. And in the end, this whole argument really comes down to one final question that the commentator leaves you with. When you hear politicians promising to step in for your own good, is it really about protecting you, or is it about controlling you? That's the question at the heart of the source material.